Okay, let's go into a little bit of Kim Il-sung and his Juche ideology. And what we're going to be doing is pulling quotes from the selected works of Kim Il-sung. It is a collection of speeches, essays, and interviews by the first leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, i.e. North Korea. Now, he was the first leader, but one thing we definitely, the history of the leadership of North Korea definitely shows us is the failure of believing in a pure monarchical system. As we see, no matter what you think about Kim Il-sung, whether he was a hypocrite or whether he was passionate about his convictions and political beliefs, whatever you may believe about Kim Il-sung, what is easily agreed upon is he was the best out of the leadership of North Korea. Kim Jong-il and today the chipmunk-cheeked Kim Jong-un. These people were big-time hypocrites, and they all enjoyed Western pleasures and restricted those from their people. So any leader you see that they hold this position that they're allowed to enjoy or obtain or do something and their citizens are not, that's already your first sign that something's rotten in Denmark, so to speak. And you especially see like just the comedy. You see the comedy in someone like Kim Jong-un giving someone like Dennis Rodman like a reception, fitting for an ambassador or a king from another country. It just goes to show you, what kind of people you're dealing with now. And of course, Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un have no, there's allegedly a Workers' Party political philosophy, but look at the soft Kim Jong-un. What experience does he have in work? Raised in the finest schools in Europe and enjoying whatever pleasure that's at his fingertips. What does he know about work? So we see the failure of the monarchical system as far as North Korea. That's the first thing we can learn from what's going on in North Korea. But let's look into a little bit of what Kim Il-sung had to say and what his political beliefs and philosophies were that set the stage for what we call Juche ideology. Now, the selected works we're going to go into starts with an essay from 1946 on the establishment of the party. With his opening sentence, Kim Il-sung makes it clear what is being formulated in North Korea is not simply communism, but rather a fusion, essentially a Korean-flavored communism. He says, the foundation of the Workers' Party, representing and defending the interest of the laboring masses of Korea through the merger of the Communist Party and the new Democratic Party, is the greatest event in the political life of our people at the present time. He goes on to reinforce the claim of the party being truly a people's party by pointing out the fact that the majority of the people who made up the party's committee membership were in fact of the peasant class. The composition of the People's Committee membership now active in North Korea is as follows. Workers, 5.7%. Peasants, 71.8%. Office employees, intellectuals, 15.8%. Handicraftsmen, 3.1%. And tradesmen, 4.6%. Now, I'm not sure how these numbers have held up today, but I would doubt that peasants represent 71% of the Workers' Committee today. Immediately after gaining control of the helm, Kim Il-sung went directly to work on reclaiming Korea from the hands of foreign imperialists and homegrown traders. Last August, the Provisional PPCNK, People's Committee of North Korea, proclaimed the law on the nationalization of industrial, transport, and communication facilities and banks which had been owned by the Japanese imperialists and pro-Japanese elements and traitors to the nation. With the imperialist, individualist, and profiteers removed from the business, economics, and media sectors of North Korea, the focus could once again be placed on the person rather than the pursuit of capital. In June this year, the PPCNK promulgated the labor law, freeing factory and office workers from harsh colonial exploitation, and introducing the 8-hour working day and social insurance system. And a law was passed to guarantee the women's social rights equal to those of men for the first time in the history of our country. So he introduced a bit of this equal opportunity in North Korea. Sung also addresses the struggle, suppression, and eventual defeat of their South Korean counterparts. The People's Committee, set up by the South Korean people immediately after the liberation, were not recognized, and worse still, they were dissolved and their functionaries were arrested and thrown into jail. And how have the U.S. imperialists and their lackeys who are obstructing the democratic independence and sovereignty of Korea dealt with and are dealing with the Communist Party of South Korea? Those villains have arrested, imposed, and murdered large numbers of the leading cadres and members of the Communist Party and banned its organ, Hebang Ilbo. And I'm sure I butchered that, but that was basically the South Korea Communist Party. See the massacre in Gwangju of last August 15th. With tanks, planes, machine guns, and bayonets, the Yankees attacked over 1,000 workers of the Hwasan Colliery who were marching towards the city of Gwangju to attend a mass meeting in honor of the anniversary, August 15th. The second installment in the collection is a speech from 1955 entitled On Eliminating Dogmatism and Formalism and Establishing Juche in Ideological Work. Sung starts the speech off dealing with matters of propaganda, as the Juche ideology was still, at this point, a relatively newly introduced ideal. There were many confusions and contradictions within the pro-Juche propaganda production. Sung addresses the misinformed and or flat-out bad propaganda being put out by his propagandists. Some of the propagandists, according to Sung, either were misinformed about Juche, were not effective enough on highlighting important aspects, or were simply not using enough of Juche philosophy in their works. One of the main focuses of Sung's complaints was the particularly bad or non-existent pro-nationalist propaganda. He says, only when our people are educated in the history of their own struggle and its tradition can their national pride be stimulated and the broad masses be aroused to the revolutionary struggle. The Gwangju student incident, for example, was a mass struggle in which tens of thousands of Korean youths and students rose against Japanese imperialism. It played a big part in inspiring the anti-Japanese spirit in broad sections of Korean youth. As a matter of course, we should publicize this movement widely and educate youth and students in the brave fighting spirit displayed by their forerunners. Our propaganda workers have failed to do so. Instead, Syngman Rhee has been making propaganda of this movement in his favor. This has created a false impression that the communists disregard national traditions. What a dangerous thing. It is impossible for us to win over the South Korean youth if we are going on working in this way. So basically he was complaining that a lot of the propaganda was just too negative. Too much of it was taking aim at the South Korean president and not really building upon the national pride of Koreans. And he didn't think that'd be effective to simply always have negative propaganda. Like, that's not going to inspire the youth to join them or be a part of them if it's just simply most of your propaganda is negative and focused on attacking a person instead of building yourself up. You know, building up your own ideology, speaking about why the youth should be attracted to the Juche ideology and not what was going on in South Korea with essentially just, you know, being another part of the globalist society that was coming about, that is, you know, quasi here today. He goes on, I noticed that in primary school that all the portraits hanging on the walls were foreigners, such as Mayakovsky, Pushkin, etc., and there were none of Koreans. If children are educated in this way, how can they be expected to have national pride? In compelling school books, too, materials are not taken from our literary works, but from foreign ones. All this is due to the lack of Juche. The lack of Juche and propaganda work has done much harm to party work. Sung had to remind his audience that the Korean communism was just that, and not that of Russia or anyone else for that matter. Comrade Pak Young-bin, on returning from the Soviet Union, said that since the Soviet Union was following the line of easing international tension, we should also drop our slogan against the U.S. imperialism. Such an assertion has nothing to do with revolutionary vigilance. The U.S. imperialists scorched our land, slaughtered our innocent people en masse, and are still occupying the southern half of our country. They are our sworn enemy, aren't they? Many comrades swallow Marxism-Leninism whole instead of digesting and assimilating it. It is therefore self-evident that they are unable to display revolutionary initiative. So they weren't, just because Russia, communist Russia, and even communist China had helped put them into power, they were not going to toe the line if Moscow said, hey, let's ease back on anti-U.S. propaganda because we're trying to, because it is not beneficial to our worldly plans right now. They weren't having it. They were specifically, as he goes on to stress, this was based off Korean, the ethnic Koreans and the tradition and the culture and the history of Korea and the Korean people and their expression into the culture. These were big parts of their brand of communism, quote unquote communism. Every effort should be made to unearth our national legacies and carry them forward. True, we should be active in learning from what is progressive internationally, but we should develop fine things of our own while introducing advanced culture. Otherwise, our people will lose faith in their own ability and become spineless people who only try to copy from others. So these are profound realizations by Kim Il-sung here, and saying, look, we can appreciate, use, and even admire and enjoy aspects of different cultures, but if we don't put our own stamp on our own culture, then we'll lose our pride in ourselves. We'll lose our desire to remain sovereign. This is something that's been completely forgotten in America. This sage wisdom that he's preaching here on how to appreciate, but also maintain yourself and build yourself up, has been completely lost in America, because now the main theme is that there is no monoculture, that multicultural is what America is. And look, we have a statue made from France with words by a Jewish poet carved in on it that tell us, give us the shit of the world, and that's what our culture is. Just deep out in the ocean where all the garbage gathers and builds their own islands. That's essentially the ideal the modern left in America are promoting for America. And we see Kim Il-sung saw that this kind of mentality would not be good for Korea, both for the country and their production, but also in the people's spirit, their soul, their pride in being who they are, and their appreciation of their tradition and culture. All this would be evaporated if they were simply lackeys to communist China or communist Russia, or whoever told them, like, this is what you have to accept, this is what you have to do, these are the stances you should take in international politics, and it's essentially these are who you should allow into your country. Even to this day, they're very strict about who can come into their country or who can even breed with their women. There's a documentary of I forget the name of it, but of American troops that would cross the line into North Korea and pretty much switched sides, became traitors to their own side. And even a lot of them got paycheck from the government and were a lot of like anti-American propaganda movies. But even a lot of them weren't allowed to breed with the Korean women. They'd ship in, they'd bring in women from other places, other Asiatic countries. Anyways, but I'm getting off topic here. So they had a very, at least Kim Il-sung tried to keep this Korean identity and a pride in this Korean identity very much alive in his country. And this is something, you see practice in communism, but theoretically in communism, this really wasn't supposed to exist if we look at the theoretical practice of it. But when we get to the pragmatism of everything, these are your best chances of getting homogeneous, united people. Is you have to have this sovereignty, you have to have this defining culture, these traditions. So Kim Il-sung is very much aware of this. Okay, next in the collection of Sung are transcripts from a press conference with Iraqi media in 1971. Many of the questions dealing with their relationship with Iraq, socialism, and the state of imperialism. Speaking about the need for cooperation, not globalism. By establishing Juche and relying on our own efforts, we do not mean on any account building socialism in isolation. We fully recognize that it is necessary for states to supply each other's need and cooperate with each other, and are striving to expand and develop it. Our position is that mutual cooperation between states should be conducted on the basis of the building of an independent national economy in each country. This alone makes it possible to expand and develop economic cooperation between states and on principles of complete equality and mutual benefit. See, this is a very fascistic stance, and like I've maintained throughout this channel, most people, there's a lot in common between, the quote-unquote socialist left and the fascist right. But most people are more into labeling people and attacking people through the labels, whether the labels are accurate or not. Okay, let's go to a question here from the Iraqi media. Question: the relations between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Republic of Iraq were established already long ago. However, it was only after the July 17, 1968 revolution that the relations took a decisive turn. And they're talking about the Baptist revolution there, Saddam Hussein. What is your appraisal of the success attained by the Iraqi people in the 2 years after the revolution, and particularly the solution of the Kurd national problem on a peaceful and democratic basis, and of its influence upon the strengthening of the anti-imperialist People's Front? Kim Il-sung answers, the Iraqi people attained national independence through their protracted, arduous struggle against the domination of foreign imperialism, and took the road of new development, particularly after July 17, 1968 revolution. This was not only a great victory of the Iraqi people, but a common victory of the peoples who have risen in the anti-imperialist national liberation struggle, and a heavy blow to the imperialist and the colonialist. That's a grand irony of today, too, what he's talking about here. Listen to what he says. This was not only a great victory of Iraqi people, but a common victory amongst the peoples who have risen in the anti-imperialist national liberation struggle. Now, the grand irony is much of today, who we call the left in America, and throughout the world, throughout Europe, is actually fighting on the side of the imperialist and trying to destroy the national themes of people. It's the grand irony of it, and they view themselves as somehow not a part of the system, but they're fighting for essentially globalism controlled by corporate oligarchies, international monetary funds, and federal reserves, and aka the usual suspects. Since the revolution, the Iraqi people, holding aloft a banner of anti-imperialism and independence, have unfolded a devoted struggle to consolidate national independence and build a new, prosperous Iraq, and have achieved great successes in a short span of time. Many difficulties confronted the Iraqi people who set out the road of struggle for building a new life. The imperialists, headed by U.S. imperialism and the Israeli aggressors and their accomplices, the reactionary forces at home, resorted to every underhanded scheme to wrest from the Iraqi people from the anti-imperialist front. On the relationship between the two countries, he says, the Korean people value the experience accumulated by the Iraqi people in the struggle against imperialism and the Israeli aggressors, and for unity, freedom, and socialism under the leadership of the Ba'ath Party, of the Ba'ath Socialist Party. On the question of Palestine, Kim Il-sung said, Our people's solidarity with and support and encouragement to the Arab people's revolutionary struggle are constant. The Korean people will continue to resolutely support the valiant struggle of the Palestinian people for liberating their fatherland and the struggle of the entire Arab people against Zionism and imperialist aggression, and will always remain a close comrade in arms of the Arab people in their struggle against the common enemy. Our people will render active support and encouragement to the righteous struggle of the Arab people at all times. Then the selected speeches following the transcripts from the Iraqi journalist questions and answer session. There's a speech from 1986 entitled For the Development of the Non-Aligned Movement. In the speech, Sung focuses on what the non-aligned movement is about and what they should be striving to achieve. This speech is separated into 6 major subjects. And we'll go through a little bit of each of those subjects here. The present international situation and independence in the face of imperialism. Imperialism is the product of aggression and plunder, and it has grown fat on ceaseless aggression and plunder. Since the emergence of imperialism, mankind has suffered disasters of recurrent aggression and war, and has been deprived of immeasurable amounts of property, wealth, and the fruit of labor. As monopoly capital grows, so its tentacles of aggression and plunder are extended overseas. This is an inevitable outcome and the law of the development of capitalism. The method of its aggression and plunder have changed with the progress of time. Today, the imperialists are employing mainly neo-colonialism to invade, dominate, and plunder other countries. By entangling many developing countries in the neo-colonialist web of the so-called aid and cooperation, the imperialists have now seized the economic lifelines of these countries, made them nothing more than their sources of raw material and their markets, and grow rich by squeezing tremendous amounts of profit out of them. See, where he's wrong in this when he's talking about the imperialist, it's not like he puts it on a nation. Like he'll say America is doing this. But like take the African diamond mines, right? For example, it's not Americans. It's not a country benefiting from this imperialism. It's individuals, corporations that are benefiting from this, that are making the money from this, that are paying slave wages here, or even enforcing slavery to get things done in third world countries, and are reaping all the benefits of it. So this imperialism is even sicker than he understands, because it's not like it used to be a country thing. It used to be, and it's funny. It's something Trump had spoken about. Like, well, when you go into a country, we should have took their oil. When he's talking about Iraq, we should have took their oil. Well, yeah, that would be a kind of imperialism that benefited the country. But this stuff that exists today, it's not even that. There's no American citizen has benefited one iota from Afghanistan, Iraq, any of these wars. Vietnam, let's keep going back. Germany, Japan, none of these wars. No American citizen has benefited at all. There is no, to the victor go the spoils. There is none of that today. It's always to the corporation goes everything. So it's this imperialism is. It's not even a national imperialism that he's kind of getting at. It's sicker than that. It's a corporate imperialism done through the mask of a nation, done through the blood, sweat, and tears of citizens of these nations. He goes on, the imperialists are working towards invading and dominating other countries in every possible way and in different fields. They are trying to invade other countries and establish political domination over them by resorting to military force and underhanded methods. They are also scheming to subordinate them economically and infiltrate them ideologically and culturally by means of surplus goods, unfair economic relations, decadent Western culture, and bourgeois way of life. So once again, going for that low-hanging fruit, turn the whole world into American consumers. You can have your McDonald's too. You could be grossly overweight as well. You can have porn overload in your country as well. Hey, just submit to globalism. They'll give you all of that. And it's sad that Il-sung looks at Western culture as decadent, but he's accurate. I mean, it used to not be. Western culture. People like Goethe, and Beethoven used to define Western culture, and even before then, people like Caesar or Plato or Aristotle would define Western culture. Today, I mean, you look at what Western culture brings, and it is decadent and very bougie. Okay, the next subject: the prevention of nuclear war and the abolition of nuclear weapons. To dominate the world by force, wielding nuclear weapons is the world strategy which the imperialists have persisted since the Second World War. The danger from this strategy is growing as the days go by. In order to abolish nuclear weapons and prevent a nuclear war, we must first create nuclear-free peace zones in many regions of the world and extend them all the time. The government of our republic and the Korean people will struggle energetically to make the Korean Peninsula and the rest of Northeast Asia nuclear-free peace zone, and in unity with the peace-loving people of the world, make every effort to create and expand these zones in other parts of the world. Well, and North Korea as a people, their attitude has changed on that, but it's today these countries trying to obtain nuclear powers or nuclear weapons are mainly doing so, for a bargaining chip, and B, defense of being invaded. Because, if you have nukes, more people are willing to listen to you or deal with you, and less likely to attack you. So it's unfortunate, but it seems the whole world's going into a race to arm themselves with more nuclear powers. Because it is a bit hypocritical when countries that, have stockpiles of nuclear weapons are telling other countries, hey, no, you shouldn't build nuclear weapons. The elimination of colonialism and racism and the accomplishment of the cause of national liberation. Under the active aegis of the imperialists, the South African racist and Israeli Zionists overtly pursue the racist and expansionist policy of aggression in all-out opposition to the cause of national liberation. In order to realize their ambition to establish a great Zionist empire in the Middle East, the Israeli Zionists have occupied Arab lands and are pursuing the policy of establishing colonies. Under the active patronage of the imperialists, they are flagrantly violating national rights of the Palestinian and other Arab people, growing more blatantly ferocious and arrogant as each day passes. First, we must intensify together the struggle to put an end to the racist system of South Africa. South Africa is a major stronghold of colonialism. South African racism is the cruelest form of colonialism. It is a major obstacle to the complete liberation and decolonization of Africa. It is clear that without putting an end to the policy of apartheid in South Africa, it would be impossible to accomplish the cause of national liberation, stabilize the situation in this area, and defend the world peace and security. Second, we must foil the expansionist aggressive schemes of Israeli Zionists. Zionism is a form of racism and colonialism. The aggressive expansionist policy of the Israeli Zionist is the main factor obstructed in the triumphant advance of the cause of national liberation in the Middle East. Without thwarting Israel's aggressive schemes, it would be impossible for the Middle East countries to achieve their independence, territorial integrity, and progress, nor would it be possible to guarantee lasting world peace and security. The non-aligned countries must strongly denounce the criminal act perpetrated by the Israeli Zionists in their opposition to the Arab people and their efforts to destroy the liberation cause of the Palestinian people. They must continue to extend active support and solidarity to the Palestinian and Arab people in their just cause. They should regard the struggle of the Palestinian and other Arab people as their common cause and take strong joint action to reject Israel in the fields of diplomacy, economy, military affairs, culture, and marine and air transport in accordance with the decision of the 7th Summit Conference of the Non-Aligned Nations. He goes on, the United States must stop giving the Israeli Zionists political and diplomatic support and military and economic aid, take their hands off the Middle East, and discard their ambition for dominating this region. Third, we must strengthen the solidarity with those people who are fighting for independence, sovereignty, and to build a new society. South-South cooperation and economic independence. South-South cooperation is a noble way for developing countries to strengthen their economy, independence, and achieve complete economic freedom through close economic and technical cooperation. The non-aligned and developing countries must also cooperate closely with each other in their efforts to improve the farming method. The most important way to increase grain production in developing countries is to improve the farming method and grow crops scientifically and technologically. Improving the farming method alone will mean a great increase in agricultural production, even though a large investment is not required. The developing countries must create new farming methods that suits the topographical and climatic conditions of every zone and country, and must make the good experience gained in this improvement widely known. The non-aligned and developing countries must establish wide cooperation and exchange with each other in the field of seed selection and production. Those countries whose technology and experience are good in the field must supply the technology on seed selection and production to other developing countries and provide progenitors when needed. In order to increase grain production, it is necessary to intensify joint study and mutual cooperation in the field of agricultural science. The non-aligned and developing countries must start a joint venture in agriculture. So he's calling for, collective unity with these companies, and as they discover things that work better for them, sharing them with other countries, essentially working together. So they can, survive the economic sanctions or the hostility of the globalist. A joint venture in agriculture is one reasonable way for the developing countries, including the African countries, to solve the food problem. If they undertake an extensive agriculture joint venture, the developing countries will not only be able to save the people from starvation by a rapid increase in agricultural production, but also strengthen the foundation of agricultural production. Establishing a global system of trade preferences between developing countries is of great importance in the improvement of trade among these countries. The non-aligned and developing countries must make joint effort to introduce this system as early as possible, which they never did, to their own detriment. The establishment of a new international economic order. Relying as ever on the old international economic order, the imperialists are plundering the developing countries of their natural resources and paying only a pittance for the results of the people's labor and obstructing the economic development of these countries. Protective trade and the high interest policy pursued by the developed countries, along with the continually worsening term of trade and the massive increase in foreign debts of all developing countries, are having a serious effect on the social and economic development of the non-aligned and developing countries. Because of the unfair international economic order, the economies of the developing countries are growing weaker and becoming stagnant. The economic situation in the African countries in particular is worsening. In reality, without abolishing the old economic order, the product of the colonial system and the lever of imperialist exploitation and plunder, it will be impossible for the non-aligned and developing countries to free themselves from international exploitation and plunder and then develop. At present, a non-equivalent exchange is being made as ever in trade between developing countries and the developed countries. The developing countries sell raw material at low prices and buy manufactured good at exorbitant prices, and the share that manufactured goods make up in the exports of these countries is decreasing continually. The result is that the trade deficit of the developing countries is increasing all the time, and their economic difficulties are becoming more serious. The development of the non-aligned movement. The non-aligned movement is a powerful, independent force of our times, which is opposed to imperialism. Only when this movement is strengthened will it be possible to succeed in repelling all forms of imperialist domination and subjugation, aggression, and intervention. Defend the sovereignty of the non-aligned countries, and settle not only in the problem of establishing new international economic order, but also all other issues in the international arena in accordance with the aspirations and desires of the peoples of the newly emerged countries for independence. And it also makes it possible to prevent nuclear war, defend universal peace and security, and give strong impetus to the cause of national liberation. But once again, these non-aligned countries, they just simply didn't get on board with what Sung was speaking about or what he desired. All right, lastly, let's end with, from the selected works, it comes to an end with a speech from 1991 now, For Free and Peaceful New World. In this speech, Sung pontificates on his New World vision, a reunification of Korea, nuclear disarmament, among other things. In order to build the new world aspired to by mankind, it is necessary to abolish the unequal old international order in all the fields of politics, the economy and culture and establishment, an equitable new international order. There are large and small countries in the world, but there cannot be major and minor countries. There are developed nations and less developed nations, but there cannot be nations destined to dominate other nations or those destined to be dominated. All countries and nations are equal members of the international community, and as such have the right to independence and equality. No privilege and no arbitrariness should be tolerated in international relations. Friendship and cooperation among countries must be fully developed on the principle of mutual respect, non-interference in affairs of other countries, equality and mutual benefit. So you see, we've gone through about a little more than 30 years of his thoughts, and they pretty much have been on the same thing. I mean, in 1991, he's asking for the same stuff he was talking about in the 1950s. Disarmament and the abolition of nuclear weapons and other types of weapons of mass destruction is the most pressing task to ensuring peace. The large stockpile of nuclear weapons now on Earth is a menace to the survival of mankind itself. So true. It is intolerable that the valuable results of science and technology created by mankind and social wealth be used for the productions of the means of aggression and war that threaten man's survival, and not for the well-being and development of humanity. The testing and production of nuclear weapons must be banned. The number of existing nuclear weapons must be reduced, and then nuclear weapons must be completely abolished. The political philosophy of our state is the Juche idea, which requires that all considerations should be centered on the man and everything should be made to serve him. By fighting in a single-hearted unity under the banner of the Juche ideology, our people have been able to build, even under the most difficult conditions and circumstances, man-created socialism in which the people are the genuine masters of the society and everything in society serves them. The democratic character of our society finds clear expression in the fact that all people, as masters of the state, equally enjoy a sound and stable life in its material and cultural aspects, exercising completely equal political rights, and that on the basis of comradely love and obligation, they work together for a common goal and develop together, helping one another and leading one another forward. I mean, so there you go. You see the philosophical fascistic tendency in the Juche thought right there, especially with the last sentence right there. They work together for a common goal and develop together, helping one another and leading one another forward. Yes, progress, forward and upward. You know, not a nanny state, not a socialist nanny state to take care of ingrates, not this, parliamentary socialist bullshit, Bernie Sanders trash, Elizabeth Warren garbage, where you cater to the worst elements of society and promise to take care of them if they give you a vote and go your way. This was Juche was an ideology based on Korean homogeneity, embracing of the culture and the traditions of the Korean people, and the culture being their racial expression manifested into reality, with common goals and going forward together, helping each other, strengthening each other, working towards these common goals. Let's go on with reunifying Korea. He says, reunifying Korea is a vital requirement of our nation. It is an important question in international politics. The Korean people are a homogeneous nation that has lived on the same territory generation after generation, a nation celebrated for its long history and fine cultural traditions. There is no eternal cause for our nation to live divided. Ours was not a defeated country in the Second World War. Our people contributed to destroying fascism, oh how dare you, through their long drawn-out national liberation struggle. In spite of this, after the war, our country was divided into North and South, contrary to the will of the Korean nation, and the nation is still divided. This is not only a source of untold misfortune and suffering for our nation, but also a cause of the unstable and dangerous situation in the Asian region, both from the point of view of the national independence and the cause of peace in Asia and in the rest of the world. The question of Korea's reunification requires an immediate settlement. We consistently maintain the three principles of independence, peaceful reunification, and great national unity, which the North and South agreed upon and jointly declared. We hold that on these principles, the country should be reunified by a founding confederacy based on one nation, one state, two systems, and two governments. So in order to find some kind of solution, he wasn't even advocating, at least the first step, not advocating, one state, one system, one government, but one unified state, and the North is a little more Juche, and the South is, a little less Juche, I guess. Now, unfortunately, the selected works of Kim Il-sung is not a great source for understanding, the ins and outs of Juche ideological philosophy, but it does give insights to the belief of Kim Il-sung and thus a broader understanding of Juche and the goals of the North Korean government. In all quotes in this video and much more can be found in the selected works of Kim Il-sung.